So everybody stand up for 2 seconds. Let's go. And the music, this is me. So everybody get ready to clap your hands and get energy going. Because normally this is my theme tune when I come on stage. But it's not moving now. No, it's not working. Anyway, what you should be doing this is... Come on. Put some energy into it. Yeah, you can. Yeah. So, hej allesammans, jag är George, jag kommer från Sverige. You speak Swedish, yes? No, so my name is George Edward. That's what my mum calls, oops, just dropped that bit. George Edward. So this is my return to Ljubljana. I was here 31 years ago. Yeah, most of you were not even born. I wasn't. Of course not. So I was here before, during, and after the war. So it was really interesting to be here, and it was really interesting to be back again. And if you think about it, I mean, my job at that point in time was to help IKEA move into what we called then Eastern Europe, now called Eastern Central Europe, or whatever it is. And I was really driving the business from a technology perspective, but more than technology, into new countries, especially in Hungary and in Poland and Czechoslovakia, as it was called. And I was sitting there when it became Czech and Slovakia, and we were down here quite a few times as well. You now have a store here, I understand, which is interesting. And my job at IKEA was multifaceted. I started off really as a COO for making things happen, as we used to call making shit happen. And really it was uncertainty of work, which is the topic of today's presentation as well. Because there was nothing decided, there was no rules apart from the rules you can bend. There was only the idea of getting things done as quickly and as good, as best as possible. And really, I've been doing that all my life. Further on in IKEA, I ended up becoming the CTO, the CIO, all that kind of things. And then moving from the technology side, crossing the divide, to the people side, and became the business development manager for people and culture. So the people side, which you sometimes call as HR, but we call people, thought I had IT on my forehead. And the people on the IT side said, scapegoat, you've moved to the people side. And so I had this idea of mixing things together. And one of the things we did was we developed digital workplace. Now that's about 15, 16 years ago. And we created a virtual organization which included what you were talking about today in some of the talks, IT, HR, and people, and travel, and basically saying there should be no barriers and no organizational connections, or not connections, but splitting things up so you can all work together across boundaries. So I kept on doing that and doing that and doing that, and ended up being responsible for what's called the future workplace for IKEA, to visualize the future workplace. Because my job was to create the concepts and drive things to beyond. 7 years before anybody could think about it. My mandate was to be 7 years ahead, which was okay for IKEA, but not okay after 30 years when I left IKEA. I started to work in AI, because 7 years is more like 7 centuries in AI. And so I started with a startup company in New York and in Melbourne to talk about AI, and became an AI an AI ethicist is really my title at that point in time, and futurist, to then go into talking around the world about AI and the future of work. Then this COVID thing came along, you may have heard of that as well, killed my job, killed my ability to make money, because I couldn't make speeches anymore for money. So then I ended up talking to an old pal of mine, who used to be the CRE manager for, or the CRE director for BBC and Walt Disney and all that kind of things. And we decided to work together and put together this company called EverythingOmni. And it's a startup company, and it really is a think tank. And what I'm going to try to show you today is how do we actually work a think tank? And actually go through those things and give you real live practices. Now, this think tank data that we're going to show is a couple of weeks old. So it's still wet, and I might make a few mistakes as I'm going through them. But there are findings, and what I want to do is actually go through those findings. So I'll start off with the model, because everybody likes the model. Then I'll go through the findings, and then I'll get into the opportunities as we come to it later on. And hopefully I can do that in these 24 seconds to Matt. So we call this thing called EverythingOmni Discovery. And you can ask me later on what EverythingOmni really means, because I should be able to answer that. And really what the idea here is to get away from the standard steering group, the standard people who make these questions or get involved in the questions. So what we try to do is we try to get, if we're working within an organisation, from the board all the way down to the janitor and everybody in between. And then we bring in suppliers, sub-suppliers. We bring in the recipients of the products if you want to do the products. Then we bring in the unions. And then we bring in students. And then we bring in customers and non-customers. And we bring in everybody that we can think of. And I usually say we bring in Elvis Costello because we want to bring in musicians as well. And people go, why is he here? It's because he's got a point of view. And this is what we don't look at, is everybody's point of view. Because what we get today is noise, 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 noise. Everybody knows the answer, but nobody knows the question. So the model is called the Muir model, not named by me, named by somebody else. It's based from future search, but it's gone a little bit further. It's based on the top part, which is about understanding uncertainty. And really we've got, if you want to think it, 4 areas of provocation, which is people, place, technology, and leadership. Now my core area is technology and people, and Chris's was place, and we did leadership together. So what we're trying to do is not come up with the answer, we're trying to provoke as we're going along. And then we go into this future part, the incubator as we call it, which was discussing today what's going to come next and getting people to agree on these things, and what we then create what's called business scenarios, things that could possibly work. And so this is a live case. This is not just a dummy example. This is real, what we're going to do. And so we started this thing, and we did it actually used the internet for this one. So we actually started off with 4 workshops on the internet, and we had about 96 people in these different workshops. And so we did a question about uncertainty of employing, engaged, and development of people, uncertainty of place, uncertainty of business leadership, and uncertainty of technology. But in that format, what we had was 4 provocateurs, experts or so-called experts. But they were not there to give a keynote speech. They were there to give 8 minutes and 4 questions to provoke the audience. So they spoke for 8 minutes, and then the rest of the people in the incubator then asked questions for 8 minutes. Now, 8 minutes and 8 minutes doesn't seem a long time, but bloody hell, it works, because you get a lot of interaction because you're cooking it down. And we did that over 4 weeks, and then we moved into the actual incubator itself. I'm actually going to show you live slides of the incubator, which was also done online. And the first part is identifying trends. Not a really good quality screen here, but identifying trends. So people are actually talking about what trends are happening. And whether they're in a business or not in a business, or whether they were a student or not a student, or whatever, you were getting all these trends coming up. And we categorise them again, people, place, leadership, technology. But then comes in the extras, the culture, the climate, and other trends as well. And so we were doing this, again, as I said, on the internet. It's quite fascinating, doing this with Muir on the internet, with all these different people, getting interactions, and then getting discussions about why is this trend a trend. And that was the first actual workshop, incubator workshop. The second one was then creating future positions. And future positions is then collecting these key trends together. And a key trend is more valuable because it actually shifts. It makes something happen. And then from the final part of the incubator was to identify these scenarios. And these scenarios are actually what we're going to talk about now. Flexible space, flexible leadership, flexible work, and flexible technology. We did do an incubator on talent management. It ended up talking about the water rise in Amsterdam, which was kind of strange how we went up that way, but it's all about climate. There is such a huge discussion about climate and people not really understanding what's going on. But anyway, so we did this whole work there, and what I want to do now is to get into the findings, and I've got a dry throat. Excuse me. So the first part is, and I'm going to go very, very, very fast, so if anybody doesn't understand me because I'm speaking in a funny way, put your hand up, and if you want me to slow down, pardon, monsieur? If you want me to say anything in a little bit more detail, just shout it out as well. But so coming out of this incubating workshops, we find that there's a question hierarchy. The business hierarchy is not working. Whether it is a business hierarchy in the physical sense, or what's coming out, oh, thank you very much, or the business hierarchy in the technology sense, because somebody was talking about Zoom, 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 Zoom. There's a technology hierarchy getting built up, which was different to the business hierarchy through Zoom calls. Talent, the war on talent, which was one of my topics I had to work with here, is not about job satisfaction and salary. And HR people are scared shitless because of that. It is a bigger picture. People are not going to work just for the money anymore. Because of the impact of what's happening around the world and place, where I want to be, what the company is doing, and everything else, especially when it gets down to values. Core values become much, much more important. And the question is when you're working for your company, do you believe in the company's values? Do they believe in you? Values is not a T-shirt that you put on in the morning and take off in the evening. Values is something that sits inside you. So core values become a very, very important part of work, along with climate. And the climate going from an ego perspective or greenwashing perspective to actually showing things happen become a huge part of how do I want to work with a company. And well-being. Well, well-being used to be on the list of HR, but it used to be about here someplace. And now it's up here. It's on the top of the agenda. Don't know how long for. And we'll get into some other things with well-being later on. And then we get into the inequality chasm, which has grown and grown and grown over the last 3 or 4 years. Who's going to work with that? And finally, policies. We had a little discussion about people bringing people into the office and people not wanting to work in the office and whatever. And I've come up with a policy talking about no policies. And tried to run that through Japan because Japan was having major challenges. This is not in IKEA, this is with Japan itself, because people can't work in Japan unless they work in Japan, which is strange because a lot of their business is outside Japan and they have to work back again. So policies have to be readdressed, and policies are written for the 1950s. They're not written for today. They're not written for tomorrow. So all these things have to be addressed. And these were the findings, and then what we actually got down to was, what are the opportunities? So we'll go through for each one of these findings, opportunities and vulnerabilities. And we've talked, and one of the things we talked about is crossovers, moving from to. So the crossover from stakeholder value to stakeholder value, from profit to social welfare, from enterprise value to social value, and really from the green side as well, from what is greenwashing to actual green economics. These are coming up, and I think these are important things to work with and work towards to making your company or your business or your idea really better, along with policies. If you don't look at your policies, now policies both on a legal or a country level, state level, but a company level, you need to readdress your policies. We had huge problems with the Betriebsrat in Germany because of what they can do and what they can't. That's the unions in Germany, because you're not allowed to work from home. It's against the law. So we have to change things there. And I'm really running out of time. Vulnerabilities. Well, because of what's happened, there is going to be questions from the economic side, the survival. There's going to be job losses as well, but mainly due to the recession and inflation, but also due to the fact of companies not being flexible and thinking about how do I want to move further forward. And I think this was addressed earlier on as well. The voice, we used to talk about the voice of the customer from a retail perspective, but the voice of the co-worker is the important voice. And I don't think anybody's listening to the voice of the co-worker, or not so much. And what we do in these incubators is that we have the actual co-workers in the meeting rooms. Quickly through flexible space, paradigm shifts, everything's moving. One of the things that comes out is that CRE is a dinosaur. It's not changed, and that will have to change. The city centres. I was just in London. We went to the Google building in King's Cross. I went to university in King's Cross 1,000 years ago, and then we went to this Google building, which is about 10 times the size of this place, and it was empty. Totally empty. Then in the financial district, it's totally empty, but the lights are on, so it looks working. So the way cities are working, the way city centres need to be replanned, is super important. And it doesn't have to be a big city. Just as we drove up this morning, there was a 1-hour tailback going into Ljubljana. That has to be addressed as well. So the whole ecosystem and the understanding of space needs to be readdressed. So from a flexible space opportunity perspective, so we need to think about opportunities in how we're going to use this space. It's not about measurements or keys or whatever. It's really thinking about what can we change and how can we change it. I used to say to the IKEA store guys that you should be able to change a marketplace within 6 hours. They thought that, because they changed it every 3 years almost. And so we're talking about another rate of change. We need to think about a way to adapt, to make things happen. So it's not about future-proofing in a way, as Peter was talking about it, but it is. It's about being able to design for flexibility, to know that what you're doing here is going to work, but it's going to change. Nothing is permanent. Everything's going to move. And then the statements coming out about sustainability is huge from this think tank. And the understanding of what's going on with sustainability.